All right, gentlemen, we are recording. Well, hello, people. I am here today with a couple of special guests. Tom Turner and Matthew Taylor reached out to me recently through Paul Vanderclay, and it's a great pleasure to be with them. This is my first conversation with them, and they have known each other for a while, but it's their first face-to-face meeting, so just a great delight to be able to host the two of them. Our conversation is going to be about the topic of distributism, which those of you who've seen my channel know is something that I have done some work on and produced some videos about, and I will link to that playlist in the show notes. And it's a great honor to have these gentlemen with me who have also been working on the same topic for quite a long time. So I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves to you and tell a little bit about their background, the work they have done individually and together, and why it is that they wanted to talk to me. So Tom, would you like to begin?
Sure. My name's Tom Turner. My background, I'm from manufacturing. I come from a different perspective from CST. Later in life, I kind of quit.
And CST is Catholic Social Teaching, just to catch people up on that.
Yeah. So later in life, I left my professional career as manufacturing engineering, and began actually a poverty-stricken distributist life. Later on in life, I'm retired now, and I describe myself as an innate distributist. I didn't read CST or any other writings or Chesterton or whatever, and thought to myself that that would be that's a great social system for us. It's just I'm innate, and it was bred into me from the time I was a small child. My father comes from a family of 6 boys, a small family farm, a blacksmith shop on it, and it's just kind of ingrained into us. And it's my approach that most previous generations were distributists fundamentally. And it's only very recently that the society has changed over to being a more of a wage earning society than a distributist society. So I connected with Matthew. We were jointly on a generative anthropology website, communicating back and forth. But there was 2 papers that he wrote that really touched me. One was Muen Shakai, about a no relationship society in Japan, and Muen Shi, which is a solitary death. That paper, which I hope we could maybe link to, really touched me emotionally, because I have a uncle who died of Muen Shi, and it was very kind of heartbreaking for me. The other paper Matthew wrote was on Weber, and Gods of the Marketplace was the name of it, but he also had Rao, and maybe Matthew can describe some of that, but Rao describes the corporate environment, and it described most of my career in it, but in it I was described as clueless, and at first that really disturbed me. But then I came to realize that it actually absolutely described my experiences on that. And with those 2 papers describing the pathos that I had lived my life in modernity, really, connected us, I think, and we've been collaborating since then. And maybe Matthew can later on or whenever describe those 2 papers for us. So that's how we got to where we're at. And you've read the joint paper that we've done together.
Okay,
that pretty much describes me.
Great. And Matthew?
Yeah. Stop me if I ramble too much, or if I'm incoherent, and say explain yourself more clearly. I've been in Japan since the early 80s. I was just a aimless college grad, and then I met my wife, and we have a family, and so I'm a
I'm going to stop you a
husband.
second and ask if you can get your audio up just a little bit. You're a little on the low side.
Okay, let's see. How do I do that?
Or just maybe make sure you're
Speak
close
loud.
and talk.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry to have my face looming. Is that loud enough?
Yeah,
I can hear
I
you.
can hear you fine. I just want to kind of see if we could all be at sort of the same volume for the recording.
Okay, sorry. So I've lived in Japan for many decades. I'm a husband, father, grandfather, teacher, I proofreader, editor, and I've gotten into different academic fields. I guess the relationship with Tom starts with Rene Girard. Actually, that's kind of, okay, this is a little complicated. Rene Girard, I got very much into Rene Girard. And actually, let me go back a little bit. My first brush with distributism was in the 70s as kind of a young hippie-ish type person, and Schumacher, if I said that right, small is beautiful. And then I never thought that was a distributist book until I found out later. Okay, so fast forward, where was I? I got into Rene Girard. Before I met Tom, I was on a list of Girard people. And I'm a convert first a convert to evangelical Protestantism, and then a convert to Catholicism. And on a Girard list, I met a guy named Jeff Hendricks, who's passed away. And he was, like me, he was a convert to Catholicism. He had been a Methodist pastor. Is my voice okay?
Yes, you're doing fine.
And Jeff was a distributist. And he's a very, very Chestertonian distributist. And I thought distributist ideas were very compelling, but that was like the early 2000s and the age of McMansions and consumer. And I didn't think society was in that big of a problem, even though the idea of distributism was very compelling. And anyway, Jeff passed away. And then from Girard, generative anthropology is kind of a splinter group from Rene Girard's mimetic theory. And I started talking on a list, and then I started talking with Tom, and then we kind of went offline. I think most of our important talks were kind of off. I kind of got off the list and just wanted to talk to Tom. I seem to get more out of these one-to-one talks than the group talks. And Tom and I kind of hit it off. He was really kind of getting it with my paper more than anybody else, maybe more than me even, because I was just kind of reporting some social problems and some psychosocial weirdness. So how can I not drag this out too long? These two papers, first it was psychosocial problems, and then kind of talking with Tom, kind of thinking it through myself, they became more focused on economics, even though I have no training in economics and I'm just absolutely ignorant. But it was the structure, the Muen Shakai, the isolation society, was caused by the setup of, the working world and people who kind of toil away at these jobs and then kind of turn into these atomized individuals. And I think Tom can describe this better than I. And then that this was really at the root of that. And that's why I got into the Weber, is that how you say it?
Weber. Max Weber?
Max Weber,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Tom liked that paper too. And then my my university has a small little journal, a Christian Institute. There's a Christian Culture Institute. And I wanted to do an interview with Tom. So the first thing I wanted to do was understand distributism, because this was a problem for me, is I could get a little bit from Chesterton, but Chesterton rambles. And I could get the encyclicals, but the encyclicals are kind of hard to penetrate. I could get a little bit from Belloc, but he kind of, his distributist material is really kind of written in this kind of axiomatic language that, you know, I really got a lot out of his book, but I couldn't really put all the pieces together. And then I got, you know, here's a little bit of Schumacher, and I couldn't put these things together. And one thing I want to say, before I forget, is your series is the first thing that really put it together for me, Mary. So I really appreciate your series and how well you did that.
Well, thank you.
But anyway, the interview with Tom was really to learn about distributism from Tom and turn that into kind of a paper. So I just wanted to team up with Tom and say, tell him. So I really am kind of a dilettante about distributism, but I saw it as more and more necessary and important because of looking at these social issues. And then finally, that journal that I mentioned, they accepted the interview, but they said that wasn't enough for me. They said, you have to do something by yourself. You can't just give us an interview. So they said, no, that's not enough. They did it, that it has been published. And so they asked for something more. And so I said, what am I going to do? Okay, so then I wrote this kind of manifesto called Christian Economics, ? But a lot of it was inspired by Tom and that interview that we had. And I connected that to UBI and Schumacher's Buddhist economics. He talks about Buddhist economics. I talked about Christian economics. And so according to Tom, that Tom liked that paper, I think. So it came out better than I expected. I was kind of doing it because this journal was demanding that I do it. And I said, oh, okay, I'll do that. And so, but anyway, so that's where I am on distributism. It seems more and more important to me. And as I listened to your series again, actually, that was driven home to me. So does that bring me up to speed?
I think so. What do you want to say what university you're at?
Yes, I'm at Kinjo Gakuin University in Nagoya. It's a women's university. The school was founded by Presbyterian missionaries in Japan who were focused on the education of women. And it has a strong Christian heritage. It's a very nice school. I like working there very much. I have very nice colleagues. So
good. All right. Well, that does, I think, catch us up on a little bit about the background of both of you. So when you reached out to me through Paul Vanderklay, you said that you, as you have said here, that you were interested in the series I did on distributism. So I'll just say a little bit about my own background of how I got into the topic. I'm also a convert to Catholicism, and I have some interest in just different social things and economics, and mainly interested in how these things impact the home and the family. So I started learning about distributism when I first made friends with a woman who was in the Catholic worker movement. And we went back and forth on some things, and she had a lot of impact on my thinking. One of the things that we talked about one time had to do with the question of giving money to people who are on the street who are begging, homeless people. And the question of whether you you should be analyzing whether they're going to spend the money on drink or drugs and before you would give them money and things like that. And she pointed me to a Chesterton quote where Chesterton had said, you can only give charity to the undeserving, because if they're deserving, it's justice. And so that was a big, kind of like a bit of an eye opener. And I took from that the understanding that when we give in charity, we're really imitating God, because we're all undeserving of what he has given to us. And even life itself, it's not as though we were somewhere before we came into existence earning the privilege of existing. It's everything is a gift to us. Then that combined with my interest in the home and home economics, and my feeling that the idea of a homemaker, someone who was creating value or adding value within the home, has been so diminished over the years. Because if you look at if you consider a family, a family is a complete society. According to the teaching of the Catholic Church, a family is already a complete society. It has all the society functions within it. It has a hierarchical structure. It has an economy. In fact, the word economy originally means the management of a household. And it has the need to bring in resources from outside, and then through the work of the members of the family, make those resources usable, add value to them, which is how we put it in economic terms, that you're bringing in the ingredients for the meal, and then you're making the meal, so you've added value to it. But that's true with everything. Women used to make their own clothes. They would get the fabric, or they would sometimes even have their own sheep and spin wool and yarn and all of that. They would make clothing. The furniture would be made, off the land for the home. All of these things you're constantly, so the family is doing all of the economic work itself, and adding value. So the family is all of the structures that are in a whole society. A family is a complete unit of society and is the basic cell of the society. We don't look at it like that anymore. We consider the individual to be the basic unit of society. But in Catholic social teaching, it's the family. So all of the other structures in the society, so the larger economy and the polity, the larger polity of the city or the state, should be, well, first of all, it's derivative from the family, and it moves into the future through the family. Because as one of the popes said, I think it was John Paul II, the future of humanity flows through the family. That's where the people come from, And so it's the family that drives everything else into the future. The market is driven into the future by the family. The polity, the political system, is driven into the future by the family. So the family has to be at the top. And if you're going to set up economic structures or political structures that end up destroying the family, then the whole fabric of the whole thing is going to fall apart. So that's kind of my looking at it, was through that lens of putting the family at the top, and also with women, how when women largely leave their homes, the economic system attempts to take all of the things and all of the services and things that women did for their families and turn them into something that could be sold. So it put that into the marketplace. So childcare, cooking of meals, caring for people when they're sick, all of these things that used to be done in the home and by women now have gone out of the home, and now they have to be paid for. And so it turns everything, everything into a commodity. Everything now has a price. Everything now is bought and sold. And even to the point now of the buying and selling of the actual human persons themselves, we know that we've found out that the abortion industry sells infant parts. We have, a whole reproductive industry that is selling, the reproductive technologies. We have, it's just the more and more commodification because of this. So, so I see these things as problems, and I see distributism as providing it kind of an answer to a system that will put the family at the center and prevent this, both the political system and the economic system, the marketplace, from being so powerful that it overwhelms and destroys the family. So maybe one of you could, or both of you could kind of respond to that. We could take it from there.
Well, I can think of the one aspect on the family is I really work towards clarifying exactly what we speak of when we speak of the family. Common conception of the family now is the nuclear family, of the mother, father, immediate children. But I believe for the vast majority of human history, it's been the extended family of grandparents, multi-generational families, plus connected families, close kin, that form the larger groups that distributism is based on. So it's the group that is the focus of distributism, and defining that group, exactly defining that group, I think is a big step for distributist thinkers. We could look at, well, for the vast majority of human history, we've been hunter-gatherers, and archaeologists tell us that the group size was about 30 people. And if you look at an extended family of, a century ago, was probably in that size of about 30 people. And those families, if you would describe the group, it would be a group that achieves survival within that group. You don't go outside that group to get survival. You get the survival there. You produce and create everything you need within that group. So if you looked at the modern nuclear family, the group in which the father finds his survival is a company totally outside that family. You have multiple groups. You have social groups. You had talked about a association of families that get together and kind of cooperate in different things, but that group is now isolated from the group that the father goes to at an employment to get survival. And then the nuclear family, the group where it's the strongest bond is there. Multiple separate groups. Distributism says one group. We work together as a team to achieve survival, and every other aspect. Doesn't mean that that's the only group that we deal with, but that's the main group where survival is gotten.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that we see as a parasitic is the notion of the family being parasitized by corporations. So we'll talk about, my husband, by the way, is a manufacturing engineer. He used to be an airplane mechanic, and he worked for Delta. But whenever you get these corporations, they'll always talk about the Delta family, the Walmart family, they're trying to take that language and apply it to themselves. And it doesn't, they're not really a family. If you start to think of them that way, what you find is if you leave them, you quickly lose your contact and your association with the people that you worked with. Matthew, any thoughts about this?
Yeah, one thing I was thinking was just my experience in Japan, say like the last 4 decades. Basically, I've been here for 4 decades, and when the dissolution, because usually when these family issues come up, that becomes a kind of culture war-ish thing, like these people are against the family. But I think maybe the conservative side doesn't see the destructive element of capitalism on the family. And maybe that's what I've seen kind of firsthand, because the thing that Tom was talking about with the Muen Shakai, the isolated society, where when I came to Japan, the extended family was really a pretty solid thing in Japanese society. Of course, a nuclear family, but maybe the economic boom in Japan was favoring the nuclear family, and now we're seeing the end result of that, which is people that reach the end of their life and they're all alone, and these people are all over the place, and so and this, it wasn't like some kind of leftist came along and challenged family values. I mean, I'm not saying that's not a big issue, but these were economic forces kind of creating what maybe Tom has a better way to say this, the atomized individual. And yeah, I see that, just a lot of solitary, aged people walking around. So that maybe that's all I have to say on that.
How do you see capitalism as being destructive to the family? What have you observed?
It's not like it sets out to destroy it, but I just think it's a natural process of capitalism. Like, I don't know, let's see, how could I put this? The boom in Japan was maybe focused on having the good life, and the good life was, and of course, I think, the extended family was definitely oppressive in some ways, like for a woman to go into, the oldest son was kind of a bad thing, because then the wife would have to live with the son's parents, and you have trouble with the in-laws. And so maybe we shouldn't idealize the extended family too much, because a lot of people maybe wanted to escape it. So maybe it's not all economic forces. I'm always afraid of kind of overstating things and mischaracterizing things, but I think generally speaking, that there is a natural tendency towards this. First, you want your family set up, you want your house set up, you want your nuclear family, you want stuff for your nuclear family, and then you commute. The father commutes super long distance this is like in the 80s, the overworked salary man, and doesn't see their kids too much. This is changing a lot. This has changed a lot. The role of fathers is much better, I think, these days in Japan. But generally speaking, I don't know, maybe Tom could speak to that. What is the economic system doing to the extended family? Why is it working like that? I kind of tried to word that in some of the essays that Tom, maybe a different essay. There was an essay called Scenes of Distress, a kind of anti-Fukuyama essay. Do you remember that one, Tom?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, Mary. I think maybe Tom could answer that better than I. What do you think, Tom?
The moment you get a job, you find your survival as a individual. In past times, when we found our survival as a group, we were forced to get along much more than as an employee, because you couldn't just walk away from the family and find survival very easily. That family, that group, is where survival was gotten, and so it made people work harder at cooperating. Social cooperation is much easier to do when your survival depends on it. the moment you get a job, you're an individual. Corporations do not hire families. They hire individuals. And this individual now can say, I'm really fed up with this family. I'm going to walk that way. And the other individual will go this way. The individualism of the family allows the dissolution of the family. That's to me, it's a very simple concept. And yeah, there's the extended family has a lot of constraints on it. In the early days of industrial revolution, the saying was, how are you going to keep them down on the farm when they see the big happenings in the city? There was a lot of material forces to atomize the family. Maybe it's time to kind of reverse some of those atomizing forces.
Okay, so two things I'm thinking about. One is, I think first to deal with a real basic question, and that is, what is the purpose of economics, or what is economics? Because I recently heard someone say that economics was the way that human beings deal with scarcity. And I thought, I don't like that definition, because it starts with the assumption that we live in a world of scarcity and not in a world of abundance. And this may be from studying permaculture that I perceive the world as more abundant than what most people might think it is. But then I started thinking, okay, well, what is economics really for? And I came to the conclusion that economics is not to manage scarcity, but is to manage greed. So the economics is to put limits on human greed. And that led me to think about, okay, the family and the political system, if we think of it as a triangle with the family on the top, and then in the two corners and the bottom, you have the politics and economics, you think, okay, the family structure and marriage is for the management of human sexual energy. Then the economy is for the management of human acquisitive energy, or the desire to acquire things. And then the politics is for the management of that energy that wants to direct itself to organizing the structures of the wider society. So then, as I started thinking about it this way, I thought, well, it's important for if the economics is about managing greed, then it's going to try to swallow up the economics system is going to try to swallow up the political and the family, because that's what it does. It's got that greed. The power structure, if politics is about managing the desire, the lust for power that human beings have, then it's going to try to take over the economic system and the family. So that brings us back to what the Catholic social teaching and what Chesterton and Belloc were saying about the economy, that that it really has to do with power. That if we allow unlimited, as opposed to having limits or management over these things, if we allow them to be unlimited, then that acquisitiveness gets out of control, and people have not property because there's a proper amount of things to have and there's needs, but then we get into the area of greed, and we get into something that grows without limit, whether it's the power of the state or the power of the market, the power of business or the power of the state. Both can grow without limit. And so in order for the family to exist, those things have to have limits on them, and they have kind of natural limits. It's hard to put it into something with numbers, but we can see when it's gone past the limit, because we'll talk about things like conspicuous consumption, or if we learn that Bill Gates has now become the single largest owner of arable land in the United States, we have to look at that and go, that's somebody who's operating without proper limit, right? Because he's not even a farmer, So So that was my first thought, is what is, what is economics for? And then to your point, Tom, about the Industrial Revolution and some of the points that you made in your paper, your interview, answering the interview questions from Matthew, has to do with technology, and that maybe we could look back on the Industrial Revolution and what we have now and say, okay, let's say that this was maybe a necessary, an evil necessity, or a kind of something we had to go through, right? To get past that, to get that industrial production, to get that level of living standard, to bring us out of so much subsistence living and more into having more free time and having more innovation and stuff. But now the kinds of innovation that we have actually make a distributed system of economy more possible than it was maybe 50 or 75 years ago, right? I mean, you think about, I don't know if are you familiar with Rob Avis up in Canada and Verge Permaculture, where he's got doing all this instruction on how to use the Google mapping to analyze your land, your property for production. So we have more tools now, and we actually have more of a chance to have a distributed system, I would think. So what do you guys think about that?
Absolutely. That's really good point. Is technology can be redirected not in the service of a large corporation, but in the service of a distributist group. And not just in agriculture, in cottage industries, small machine shops. Automation is not just in the realm of factories. Automation can be accomplished in the realm of cottage industry and family farms. That's definitely the direction that we should be going. And it's kind of a not an assumption. Well, the narrative we're told now is that there's a false dichotomy, that either you accept technology and the wonderful things that the wonderful consumer items that we've received with the system we have, the system of corporations, the system of modernity. Either you accept it with that, or we go back to the Stone Age. There's no in between with that. And that's really a false dichotomy. That's the thing that most people accept. A lot of people that I describe distributism to, and it's like, almost immediately knee-jerk reaction. What do you want to go back to the Stone Age? It's kind of bad. But to your point that when the Industrial Revolution happened, as from a historian standpoint, it's very interesting to just go back and relive the Industrial Revolution and the invention of all the new things, the steam engine and everything, and just examine it at that time of how it could have gone. Instead of creating the big factory systems, how it could have been reapplied as in the cottage industries. But the big guys, who Matthew and I, we like the metaphor of Hudge and Gudge.
Yeah.
We always speak of Hudge and Gudge, but they controlled how the new emerging technology was applied. And
Maybe
applied,
explain the Hudge and Gudge for people who are watching.
Well, Hudge and Gudge, they sound very, very similar, but one would be the businessman and one would be the statesman. In our political environment now, we have a division into left and right. And the people on the right generally distrust government and think that corporations are their friends. And the people on the left kind of distrust corporations and think that government is their friend. But in reality, Hudge and Gudge are buddies. And in this split between left and right, they welcome that to keep us divided. But Hudge and Gudge, from the very beginning, have been buddies. I have a paper I could link to of just an exploration through history of how Hudge and Gudge have had a more, and the exchange has always been tribute for protection. Government protects corporations, businessmen, and in return they receive tribute. Corporation hands money and to the government, and the government gives back protection, and that has not changed at all. In fact, it's escalated more and more and more. Kind of make a point, speaking of politics and everything, is to never confuse Hudge and Gudge, because they're the same. Hudge and Gudge is exactly the same. The politician was a year ago a businessman, and this businessman might next year be a politician. They interchange back and forth. Hudge and Gudge is a really a powerful metaphor to not get caught up in the politics wrongly.
Well, I like the sound of Hudge and Gudge because they sound like sludge. And if you're an ordinary person trying to make your way through the world, you're having to constantly trod through that sludge and see if you can get through it. And they're kind of sucking at your feet all the time, holding you back, from making progress, because they're parasitic upon everything that you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
I'm like one of the permaculture people who likes to sometimes invoke this saying, everything I want to do is illegal, So that is very evident. I mean, if anybody thought that there was some kind of real difference between corporate power and political power, they have got to be over that now. I mean, it is obvious that the corporate and political power are joined at the hip and are basically against the people, So I think that was kind of, maybe at the time that Chesterton came up with that Hudge and Gudge idea, maybe at the time that he came up with it, it wasn't as in evidence as it is now. But so possibly it was a little bit on the prophetic side from him. But if somebody can't see it now, they just have to be walking around with their eyes closed, that's for sure. So when you talk about the technology of being able to make things more available, and that it could have happened, right? That's Belloc's point. Belloc's point was, rather than enclosing the common lands and taking all of the people that were in the cottages and forcing them by economic force to move into the cities to work for the factories, they could have owned that technology, and they could have used it themselves and profited themselves and kept their way of life more and their families intact in the way they were, but they were moved by economic pressure into the cities. And the destruction of the family really happens, I think, in an accelerated way once you move families into the city, just because of the crowding. We know that back at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the conditions were horrific. The health conditions of the families were terrific. And of course, that's been ameliorated by ameliorated greatly by the laws regarding, how people can be worked, how many hours they can be worked, under what conditions, with, safety conditions and things like that. But it was, you're right. It did not have to be the way that it was. So what do you envision as a way that people would go from what they're doing now? Because you did it yourself. What's a way of moving from where we are now into something that's a more distributed economy?
I believe it's done one group at a time, one family at a time. And the defining moment really is when you quit your real job, the real job. When you quit that, and now you have to find survival in the group, and almost immediately you reject consumerism. You have to live inexpensively if you're not really sure of the income coming in. But that's the major step. I sent Matthew a video. It's a Just a Few Acres Farm, a YouTuber who was an architect, kind of like me, a professional engineer who quit to begin a family farm. And he did well, he actually wrote a book on the decision to quit his job and to start the farm. He did a nice short video Matthew watched about the process of doing that. And some of the big steps were commitment from the family, that, okay, let's do this, and we're all going to work together. Extracting labor from children, which today is an absolute taboo, but is an absolute requirement for a distributist type lifestyle. But it's done one at a time, one family at a time, who moves from the atomized employment-based economy to a group, a committed group, distributist type economy, one at a time.
So Matthew, what do you see? Are you seeing any of the movement toward this in Japan? You're seeing, you said there was something about some group in Japan that was moving towards some of these principles, applying some of these principles?
No, I'm not. There probably are, but I haven't been able to get into that yet.
Well, yeah,
the paper I wrote, the paper I wrote was more like, you know, the forthcoming paper. It wasn't how to do it. It was more like that, agreeing that it should be done.
Okay.
And as I listen to you guys, I think just off, you know, just speaking off the cuff, maybe there's a lot of different pathways. You know, maybe not everybody's ready to quit their job. Maybe they gotta hustle. They gotta, you know, they gotta support the family. So maybe there's some, you know, kind of smaller steps they could take in that direction. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
I mean,
I was wondering, I know that when you talked about Japan being atomized, you know, and you talked about the old people living alone, dying alone. One of the things that we're getting a lot of images from in Japan is young people who are deciding to be alone at the early stage in their life. They're not people who, you know, possibly were married and then got divorced, or widowed and had no children, but are starting from, you know, in their 20s to say that they're not going to ever get married, they're not going to ever have children, and they're looking for a whole lot of substitutes for, you know, emotional substitutes for all of those normal human interactions. So that's very saddening.
Well, it's Mary, that's actually where I started with this social isolation thing, like in 2006, and it's younger than that, and maybe it's worse than that, because it's you know, it's elementary school kids not going to school. It's teenagers kind of shutting themselves in a room. So it starts earlier than the 20s, and it takes a lot of different forms.
How
Yeah.
widespread is it within Japan?
I've heard there's a word called hikikomori, which is a kind of kids, usually it's young male, starts at maybe teenagers that won't leave their room, literally will not leave their room. And I've heard up to 1 million, but these numbers, I'm a little afraid of sensationalism, like, that's a really good number, the missing million. And I'm not sure how accurate that is. It's a lot, though. It's a lot. A lot of people will just kind of lock themselves.
See it as a problem, like do the Japanese themselves see this as a problem that should be somehow addressed within their society?
Yes, I think, it got a lot of attention. And I've met young people that were like hikikomori for like several months or something like that, and they got out of it. So I think people are kind of adapting and learning how to get counseling, how to talk to others, how to form support groups. But it's a serious problem. What was the question? I'm sorry. I spaced out your question.
Yeah, go ahead, Matthew. Go ahead, Tom.
We're talking about distributism in Japan. This is something Matthew and I shared here. During World War II, in the Allied bombing campaign, to protect industry, Japan, the government of Japan organized a wide distribution of manufacturing. So there weren't large factories like there were in the United States. They were all split up into small cottage industries spread across the countries to survive Allied bombing. And so the machine industry, the machine shops to make the small parts to make aircraft or tanks or whatever, was widely distributed across the country in small family-run machine shops. After World War II, that continued on. It was just maintained as a system norm, really. And it worked very well. I got my driver's license in 1973 during the gas crisis, and America made really big, terrible cars, gas guzzling cars, and the Japanese made small ones. And the Japanese auto industry just really took off right then and really took over the world. And they were based entirely on a distributist economy of small cottage machine shops spread throughout the country. Since then, Matthew, being in Japan, has talked to colleagues and confirmed that to a large extent is really does still exist in Japan now. So distributism very often doesn't make the headlines. People aren't really aware of it, but it still is there as part of even the economy of the Japanese, who most mechanical engineers around the world will kind of worship the Japanese as really having their stuff together, being, really with it. I just wanted to add that before the conversation drifted too far.
Yeah, no, that's important, because it is very important to talk about other fields. As you mentioned earlier, it's important to talk about other things other than the agrarian issue, which is a big issue, because, food is a more basic need for human beings than machines are. But we need machines a lot of times even to work, to be able to work efficiently, to produce food. But the fact that you're talking about machines, machine shops being small, being widely distributed, is important, because that's, when we talk about distributism, that's what people always ask. Well, how are you going to produce airplanes? How would you produce cars? How would you, how would you produce, a bridge or something like that? And so I think that's a valid question. How would something like that be produced? How distributed can that the manufacturing of those things be? How small can you have shops? Does it mean you can't have big shops? And of course, distributors say, no, you can have big shops, but then for the big shops, you have ownership of the productive property being widely distributed, or maybe making sure that the profitability of the company is also distributed back to those who are laboring over it. So it doesn't, I think it's an important point to get out of the idea that distributism means that we have less of the kinds of consumer goods that, you know, that we value and the things that we value. At the same time, I think a lot of people are spending their working lives making things that are not good for their fellow human beings. And then a lot of other people are spending their lives marketing and selling those things that are not good for their fellow human beings. And this is the idea of the unfettered market will make, you know, whatever we make, whether it's, you take the pharmaceutical industry is a real good example of that. We have drugs that work, just fine for a particular illness. They're well tested, they've been well tolerated by people, but then they go off patent. And when they become available generically, the companies respond by tweaking the formula. And it may be that the new one is actually not as good as the previous one, but now they heavily market the new one to the doctors, because once a drug goes off patent and is available generically, they're not making the same amount. They're not making the same amount of money. So we have a lot of those things in our economy. In a distributist economy, a distributist mindset would say, look, it is, everyone really needs to work, you know, in our, you know, not have a job, but everyone needs to work. That's the human condition. We have to work, right, to take from our environment the resources and then shape them to our human need. We have to work. Doesn't mean that everybody has to have a job, but we also have to put in the element that, you know, whatever work that someone is doing is supposed to be beneficial for their fellow human beings and be contributing to the common good. Work that does not do that is not in accord with the dignity of the human being. So maybe if we had more distributed manufacturing kinds of jobs and more distributed agricultural kinds of jobs, there'd be enough work for people to do that they wouldn't, so much of the labor force wouldn't be shunted into these kinds of production that are really inimical to the common good.
I think you confused two things there. We were talking about whether to go distributist or not in manufacturing, and then consumerism. You know, consumerism, the whole thing of making these things that we really don't need. But to get back to the distributist part, each manufacturing corporation makes decisions themselves. They make the choice whether to go distributist or not. They call it, one would be outsourcing, to, instead of us manufacturing this, let's just us buy this from someone else. And that would go right down the parts list of all the individual parts they make. They will buy it from someone else. And that by itself creates a distributist economy. Or they can go the other way of, they call it vertical integration. The most famous example of that would be Ford's early automobile plant at River Rouge, I think was the name of it, where in this factory, iron ore came in, coal came in, rubber and sand to make glass. And out the other end of that factory went a Model Ts, or yeah, Model Ts they were manufacturing. So it was totally vertically integrated. Every aspect of the work was done entirely within that corporate, that big corporation. Each employee was totally atomized. You know, you do that. So each corporation today makes that choice whether to vertically integrate or to outsource. And as a manufacturing engineer, it was my job, and I was always the advocate of vertical integration to keep everything within the realm of the big corporation, because we could do it cheaper and more efficiently than it was to distribute. The example from the Japanese cottage machine industry says that you can be incredibly competitive with outsourcing or a distributist type economy. But
Okay, so the corporations are making the decision to do the vertical integration, as you said, and you mentioned that because they view it as more efficient, which when I hear you say more efficient, I'm thinking you actually mean that there's less labor, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so less labor means an excess labor force, right? So you have excess labor because you're using less labor in that process. And that's the thing that I think creates a situation of people being available or needing work that then are available to create, the kind of excess consumer stuff and the products that are deleterious to human health and to human thriving. So that if for example, one conversation I was having with someone had to do with like plastics. Plastics are so important and they're so good, and they come from a source, petroleum, that is extremely valuable and is a finite resource, as far as we know, is a finite resource. And so plastics are not some evil thing that we would want to get rid of. But, do we need to have a gazillion brightly colored plastic toys for children at Christmas? But if you were to say to somebody, look, let's agree as a society that, we're not going to have all of these, very, very quickly disposable, because how long do they last? They don't last long in the home or with the children. Then they get broken easily and then discarded, destroyed. And then they go into the landfills where they take for, just who knows how long, thousands of years to break down and actually recycling them is extremely labor intensive. So then, but somebody would say, yeah, but what would all these people do? What kind of work would they do? They have to have something to do. They have to have some way to support their family. So maybe they become a manufacturer of these other things. Whereas what I'm thinking is that the more distributed economy is more labor intensive. It's more labor intensive with regard to agriculture. It's more labor intensive with regard to manufacturing. And it puts more of the human beings in the society to work at things that are truly constructive and are in accord with their human dignity, so that they can make a real contribution to the common good through their labor. Not simply, a person could say, well, yes, I know that the product I'm making is garbage, and or I'm selling, or maybe I work in sales or I work in advertising, and I'm selling something that's really garbage to, just manipulating people to create a sense of desire for it. And really it's, at the end of the day, by the time this product is purchased and used, the effect of it is bad on the society and on the human beings. But I'm supporting my family by it, and you can't say that that's wrong. What else am I supposed to do? Whereas I think in distributism, we would like to say, look, there's plenty of work for everyone. We're not after the maximum amount of efficiency. We're after the maximum of the human good of living a life of dignity, having a good family life, and at the same time, your share in providing for the needs of your fellow man through your work. So that Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think something we really have to look at is what the Industrial Revolution and technology has done for us. In the early 1800s, I get this off PBS. I hope I get the number right. Someone says that when you hear a percentage, that 99% of the time it's just made up. But in the early 1800s, 85% of us worked in agriculture. 85% of all human effort went into feeding us. Now it's less than 5%. So that's like a drastic thing. So this whole idea that we have to be working as hard as we did in the past is just wrong. We don't have to be working that hard. We can work far less hours in the day and still survive. But what we do is we create needs that never existed in the 1800s. You know, all these consumer items that we have are now considered needs, not wants or desires. They're needs. We have to have these things now in order to keep ourselves working as much as we used to work in the past. The economy kind of is artificially ramped up more than it really needs to be. And I think that goes to another whole kind of philosophical issue of consumerism and what is consumerism.
Yeah, I think it is.
Matthew and I have talked many words on this, and it's my belief that consumerism is the individual, once again, the atomized individual who doesn't find his existence in a family group. The atomized individual has to create an identity, individual identity in that marketplace by purchasing things. You could say that he's a beer drinking, pickup truck driving, country western music listening to guy, and she's a wine drinking, Volvo driving, jazz listening to woman. We create these individual identities by what we buy. And that's really the heart of consumerism. And we consume way more than we actually need. It's just in an effort to create identity.
Well,
it might be a
yeah,
side shoot from distributism, but
right. And this is why I think permaculture and distributism need to get married. As I've thought that for a long time. Because
Can you guys explain? I'm sorry, could you guys explain permaculture a little bit? Because I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's good. That's good. We probably should. Did you want to go first, Tom?
I think permaculture is very simple. It's just in the name is that
we lost you, Tom.
Your signal's getting
We
glitchy.
lost.
He'll probably come back. You okay? You back?
yeah.
We lost
Tom, we lost you for about a minute there, or 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
What is permaculture?
It's living in such a way that it's sustainable. I mean, it's a really basic point. You must be sustainable in everything you do. And if you look at modernity, the modern world, almost nothing we do is sustainable. Nothing is sustainable. People will argue, well, we have enough oil in the ground to last us for 100 years. Well, what's going to happen after 100 years? Sustainability. Every aspect of human existence needs to be in line with sustainability.
And I would say that permaculture is a design science for designing the way that human beings live and designing their habitats in a way that is sustainable, but also is, provides an abundance. So it's not a sustainability with a kind of severe austerity, and we can't eat good food, and we can't have beautiful things. But you look at some of the more indigenous, or how would you say it? I don't want to use the word primitive, but you look at societies that lived before the Industrial Revolution. And when they had good land practices and they were not too severely under pressure from either disease or drought or enemies. So a lot of times we think of people in the past having, living through severe food shortages and stuff. And probably about half of those food shortages were created by human beings going in and burning each other's crops and that sort of thing. So permaculture is a design science for designing human habitation in such a way that it is sustainable and also abundant. So we do have, and this gets back to my previous point about this idea that economics is about managing scarcity. No, it's not, because there is enough. There is enough to meet our needs and more than that to have an abundance, but there is not enough to sustain human greed. So the purpose of economics should be to tamp down the ability of one person to accumulate so much that then they have a tremendous amount of political power as well as economic power. But back to that, so there's some principles, I can mention some principles of permaculture that are interesting that I think have a lot of application. One is the idea of not having waste, or of managing waste, using waste as a resource. And one of the things that we have in an industrial, commercial kind of society is we have this whole planned obsolescence idea that creates a lot of waste. So for example, right now at this minute, there really is no reason why a refrigerator should not last 50 to 100 years. I mean, we have the ability to make a refrigerator that would do that. We have that technology, but no one makes refrigerators like that for consumers. We don't make them that way. Why not? Because, well, the manufacturer would say, well, what if we made refrigerators and, they last 100 years and, then once everybody's got one, what are we going to do? Right? So that would be that's the mentality. The mentality is that we have to keep making and throwing things away. Otherwise we won't have work for people to do. So how would permaculture address an issue like that? Or how would distributism address an issue like that?
I think
you go, Matthew.
What I was thinking about this earlier, how this consumerism and everything like that. I think in Tom's vision of the kind of the home workshop where people are kind of making their own stuff, I think there will be, if more people start doing that, there will be a natural tendency to, stop obtaining, wanting to obtain frivolous stuff, or if you do make your own. I think that's something that clicked for me when Tom was, we in our interview, he was just kind of rattling off, well, here's all the stuff that you could do, with a home workshop. And then, this kind of local production, very, very local production, like starting with a home. And I think a lot of this excess and things that, of course, almost everybody agrees are kind of negative, even when they indulge. I think a lot of that would sort of kind of start to take care of itself. Maybe is that too hopeful? It would be a natural process,
right?
Just if it was spread out more,
right? Because people would,
in other words,
more engaged in life, right? People would be more engaged in life.
Yeah, and engaged in their engaged in the stuff they're making, or, you know, getting very locally. And it would just, I mean, you could even produce very frivolous, silly stuff that's maybe very, very beautiful or very, very pleasing, but it's something that you made, or that, you know, was made in the area or something like that.
Yeah, it's a
Does that make
venue
sense?
for, it's a venue for human creativity. It's an
Yeah.
outlet. And
Yeah.
when you go to a factory and you assemble the same thing again and again and again, you have no creativity there. Distributism is a great fertilizer
Yeah.
for creativity.
So one of the things that I've been
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
about,
But if you have a 3D printer,
yeah, 3D printers, that's
Yeah.
opening up whole new worlds of possibilities for people. One of the things I've been thinking about is that what we need to do is kind of re-village the economy. Is try and say, you know, like okay, so I live on a block, you know, of in a suburb, and so, you know, if we could put together all the people in the block and say, how many things can we produce right here on this block, you know, for ourselves. Now, I do have some neighbors that, you know, have chickens. I have several neighbors that have chickens. I have several neighbors who are gardening, you know, seriously. And, you know, my husband knows how to build things. Recently, a neighbor was putting up a shed, and a couple of the other neighbors went over and helped him work on the shed and things like that. But, you know, if we were really serious and said, how much of an economy can we create right here among this little group of people? I don't know if that is going to happen in a geographically, or if possibly structures like a parish could get together and do something like that. So I have some friends in my parish that I get before the COVID thing was that I was getting with on a real regular basis. And we were talking about distributism and permaculture and stuff. And one thing I said is, we should put our heads together and see if there's one thing that we can become completely independent from the outside on. And I suggested that it be peppers because I grow a lot of peppers. And, you know, from the peppers, you can also, like, we dried them and made pepper flakes and that kind of thing. So you're making seasoning. And then one of my friends is from Trinidad, and Trinidad is famous for hot sauce, which is actually a fermented food made from hot peppers. So if we put our heads together, we could create a little group where just in that one thing, with that one product, we're completely independent. And then in my parish, we also have somebody who makes wine. You know, we have a farmer friend of us who gives us cabbages, and I make sauerkraut out of the cabbages, that kind of thing. So if you can find these little cycles, and it's kind of like, because there's a big economy, and we can't, in a way, it's almost impossible to stand against it because of the power it has and the political power it has. But when you're doing permaculture, you think of things like microclimates, like you have a microclimate. You might have a large climate that you're dealing with where, say, you know, it gets cold at a certain time of the year and it stays cold. Then in the spring it warms up. But you may have an area that's near, you know, a brick wall of your house where the sun is shining on it, even in the wintertime, and those bricks are retaining a certain amount of heat. And you'll find that you can extend your growing season by planting something. Something can grow there near that heat source that could not grow in other parts of the yard. And they call that a microclimate. So
Fruit wall.
Pardon?
Fruit walls, they
Fruit
called
walls,
it in the
yeah.
1800s. It was very common in France and in Northern Europe.
Yeah. So the thing is that we can work to create micro economies. We have a large economy that is a structure so powerful that we can do very little in some sort of direct way to change it. But if we create a lot of micro economies, then, you know, over a period of time, as those grow and as people see that that's a beautiful way to live. And that's one of the things I think that people need to see, is that there's a beautiful way of life and meeting more of your own needs close to home, or from your own hands, from your own yard, that it's an attractive thing. Then we gradually change the larger system, because I don't think we have any way, we're not going to be able to turn, you know, the whole large structure that's very powerful and has so many entrenched interests. But like you said, Tom,
Right.
small groups, right? In small groups, we can do it. And we can start by, I think, trying to live it as a distributist within our home, and then with a few of our friends.
Group size, it becomes very important. You know, you're talking about small groups. So you get an example from the military organization. The size of a platoon is around, I think it's 25 or 30 people. A platoon is a natural sized group that can be organized in a detailed fashion by one person. One person can know what all the people are doing and communicate back and forth and keep them organized. So that would be the like a distributist group of committed people, you know, formally committed through vows and promises and contract. Beyond that, the next size group of people, you talk about revillaging, the next size group of people would be somewhere around 150 people. That would be the military company. That's the number of people that can recognize the one person, the commander of the company. Everybody can recognize him by his face and his voice, and he can recognize everybody else by their face and their voice. So 150 people, the village that you want to talk about, is the next size group beyond that, with a certain level of commitment also to those people.
The Dunbar number, they call that.
Dunbar number?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Some kind of sociologist that studied what is what is the number of people that you can actually have relationships with, you know,
Right.
really have a personal relationship with. And they came to it was somewhere between 100 and 200, usually average out around 150. Yeah.
So if you bring this whole concept of the group, the size of the group, back to the CST principle of solidarity, and there's a hierarchy in solidarity of how solid you're going to be with these different groups. Your individual family, your distributist group, where you make commitments, serious commitments and contracts with, you have a much higher level of solidarity with these people. The next size group, the village that you're part of, you have solidarity with those people at a slightly less, but still a solid point. As the size of the group goes up, once you're into nation states, city states and nation states, your level of solidarity with those people drops way off. The question you might be asked is, what is the farmer in flyover zone? What is his solidarity level with the banker in New York? You know, there's a hierarchy in that I think should be made clear.
Right. What about the freedom cell concept? Have you heard of that?
No.
So there's something that started kind of recently, and it's in a way a response to a perception that we're entering much more tyrannical times. And it's this idea of forming freedom cells. There are some networks, there's a website, freedomcell.org, and then there are some networks around the country. And they start off with 8 people and who form a kind of a mutual aid structure with each other, you know, and communication structure with each other. And then each of those 8 go out to 8 more, and then they form that that body of 64, and it's a larger and larger structure like that, but it's like a network. And the idea of it is that, if we do face a situation where, we have more further and further tyranny, things like, forced vaccinations or forced quarantines or this kind of thing, that you have a network of people that you can count on, that you can communicate with, that are mutual assistance. Of you have, maybe it can be even 8 families together, but if someone is being forced into something at their job where they have to quit, because otherwise they will be they have a choice of either quit or have some procedure forced on them, and they say no, then you have enough people around them that can say, we'll help you get on your feet and keep your family alive, and keep your roof over your head while you make a transition, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different structures that people are looking at, that are even in the process of being set up, just because of the necessity for what we're facing. I don't know how you look at the economy right now. And Matthew, I don't know what's going on with Japan. I understand Japan's done pretty well with the virus and everything. But here in the United States, the number of people that have been thrown out of work and the number of businesses that have been closed is like it's like heading for a disaster in terms of the economy.
Yeah, I've been reading about it. I think it's of course it's difficult in Japan, but it's much better situation. I think there's no, I don't know. I'm horrible at answering questions tonight. I'm sorry. It's morning for you guys, but it's night for me. I think it's been handled much better because things haven't been locked down so much. People, it's more like a voluntary, you kind of limit, where you go and what you do. But I haven't had the draconian lockdowns like I've been reading about, which is a bit of a shock to me, actually.
Yeah.
I just get a lot more sense of freedom here. And then there's a lot of campaigns, to, maybe it's a little bit too much on the hudgy side, but there's the Go To Eat campaign. There's campaigns like, if you go to restaurants, you get kind of like a voucher, or you get some, the government will pay for some of that, and that's to keep restaurants going. And then the same thing was Go To Travel, is to keep the hotels and tourist places open, and encourage people to travel. I don't know if that's a good, we've certainly taken advantage of those, but that kind of thing. Is there anything like that in the States?
Well, I live in Georgia, and Georgia's not locked down. It went through a brief period of lockdown. I don't know what's going on in Atlanta. I'm not that far from Atlanta, but I try and avoid ever going there. But in my area, in the town that I live in, it's very open. Their businesses are open. We've been out to eat, and the restaurant that we were at was like full as could be. There's new construction, there's businesses, new businesses being constructed right, near where I live. So we're not in lockdown here. But what I hear from other states is terrible. Idaho's probably not locked down. I can't imagine that, right? No. So so the situation in the United States is very scattered. Some areas are really bad, but some areas are moving along. But I think in terms of the national economy, because there is a national economy, that the devastation of the number of people out of work and all of the what do they call these things? Stimulation bills that they're having to do is going to drag all of us. It's going to drag everybody down regardless, even of the areas that didn't lock down. So, so anyway, that's why I think people will be forced into looking at alternatives like distributism.
Yes,
Because
yeah,
of,
I agree with that, definitely. Mary, there's one more thing I kind of wanted to mention. I don't know if we've gone on too long already, but
we're good.
I'm sorry I've been such a horrible interlocutor. I'm kind of more interested in listening to you guys than saying anything. And then when you ask me something, I kind of go, I don't know. But anyway,
I'm trying to make sure I don't leave you out of the conversation.
I appreciate that. Thank you. One thing that Tom and I got into kind of by accident was, and this is relevant to the Pajoian, Vervankian, van der Kleyen world, the distributist storytelling. This became kind of important to us. And at first I thought maybe it was a trivial thing, you know, how do you image distributism? And then Tom was talking about Spencer's Mountain and the Waltons, and he can talk about that later. And then I said, well, Ghibli movies, actually Ghibli movies are very, very, almost all of them have this kind of distributist underpinning. You know, I mean, the way
at all.
you didn't watch like Kiki's Delivery Service or My Neighbor Totoro. You didn't? Oh, okay. No. I thought they were big in the States, but there's so many distributist themes kind of woven into the Ghibli movies, and then kind of negative visions too, because a movie like what was the name? Who's the little robot guy who's stranded on the earth? And
Wally.
The human society that's floating in space. That's kind of a vision of UBI. It's just like their work is to consume, and they're not evil or anything. I mean, they're congenial people, but they're just and that movie is kind of a very interesting vision. But I don't know what ways to tell the distributist story that not only as a didactic thing, but as maybe just a way to kind of bring it into being. Anyway, that was just a thought I wanted to get in. But Tom, do you want to add something about Spencer's Mountain and that series?
Well, that Walton's Mountain, I don't know if you've seen that, Mary. That's that really describes our lived experience, situated right at World War II. Where before World War II, we were a heavily distributist type society. And then after World War II, that it all broke up and we all went into factories. The war effort, the arsenal of democracy that just cranked up industry at an incredible level. Where they were manufacturing B-24 bombers every 40 minutes, one coming off the line. All the men went off to fight war, not all of them, but a great deal number of men went off to fight war. The women went into the factories and industry just exploded. After World War II, they couldn't let that stop because they just loved that, they being Hudge and Gudge. It was just awesome. And so instead of building military equipment, we now had to build consumer items and keep that same level of productivity going. And that just brought us right into modernity. We don't have to go very far back to see when distributism was really the norm of our society. And Walton's Mountain was placed right at that point, as we're in the Depression era, where they got their survival. There was a group. There were about 15 people on the show. There was a group that got their survival together by doing lumber, agriculture, supply, whatever they could do And then as the war came and went, then this whole family split up and they went their different ways, and Walton's Mountain was no more. That's really a sign of life in the United States and perhaps all around the world. World War II really was the defining curtain. I call it the Iron Curtain. You know, the real Iron Curtain descended upon us, and distributism is on the other side of that Iron Curtain.
Right, right. Well, yeah, I think we have the memory in us not too many generations back. And we have the attractiveness of, the stories. I think the stories are important. One of the things that I point people to all the time are the homesteading families that have videos, that have video channels on YouTube that show, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Justin Rhodes, who's got, his little passel of children on a farm. Joel Salatin, he has tours of his farm, and there's just tons of homesteading families, and also families even that live in the suburbs, but where they show how many things they're able to make and produce from just a small plot of land for themselves. So I think those stories, those pictures, those images are very attractive. And so I think there's hope. I think we're in for a rough spell, and I don't know how many years it will take to come out of it, but I think we're in for a real rough spell in terms of the economy in general. And I hope that these ideas can offer some hope to people, that there's a way for them to get through it, working together and meeting their own needs, and not necessarily just relying on the government or waiting for some business to come along and offer them a job. And we have to keep talking, and we have to keep offering these, these possibilities. So I will definitely put a link to Permies.com up in the notes under this video, but also, and I'll put some links to some other YouTube channels that I know where people are living that kind of, permaculture distributist lifestyle that people can look at. And if either of you have things that you want me to link, just send me the links and I will put them in. And, when we get an opportunity, maybe we can talk a little further, maybe dive into some more of Shoemaker's ideas. If you want to do that, Tom, and Matthew, and anything else. I mean, I would be happy to talk to you guys again soon. I think this has been terrific. It's so great to find people, so widely divergent experiences, coming to these same conclusions. I think it's terrific. And you got a lot of machinery behind you, Tom. What's that machinery behind you?
I wanted to know that.
My shop. This is my shop.
Oh my goodness.
That's the pool. There's a billiard room here. There's actually a workbench over top of the table that drops down by ropes and comes in. That's a workbench there.
Okay.
But yeah, just machinery, just different machinery.
My husband's going to be jealous. He's
Tom, are you working on something distributism related?
I'm not currently working on it now, but I have a few ideas going at the time. Some of them are kind of documented in the Permy.com website, and I'll send you links on that, Mary, if you want to put them in.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
One of them is on housing, straw bale construction on housing and so forth.
Okay. Yeah.
A distributist group, more than anything, really needs to purchase land. Land is the really basic part of it. But when you buy land with a house on it and you have a huge mortgage, that is like that shackles you to employment. You have to get a real job and stay employed in order to pay that mortgage off. And it's, if there's ways of building homes that are very functional and warm and comfortable, yet cost very, very little. It makes it more ideal for a distributist group to be successful. My
Right.
whole point from a technological standpoint is to create design parameters for engineers to tackle to favor distributist groups, not consumers, to favor distributist groups and help them out. And there's a lot of different things that we could do. I shared with Matthew about home clothing. Shoemaker touched on that, and so that created like a little tangent on that. And so if we redirected technology towards home clothing industry, it could drastically revolutionize it.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that now. I mean, I could rant and ramble for a long time, but
Let's make that a subject of our next conversation, because I'm very interested in that. And I'm also interested in the way that would affect the world economy, because the clothing industry there's a whole ton of stuff about the clothing industry that we could talk about. So
Yeah.
let's make that the topic of our next conversation.
it would be great. The clothing industry is the start of the Industrial Revolution. It was the cotton mills in England that really kicked it off.
That's right, definitely. Okay.
As
And
we
Matthew,
getting-
thank you for staying up late for us. And Tom, thank you for getting up so early.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I apologize. I haven't been talking much, but I've been more like as I said, I'm kind of a dilettante, and I'm kind of listening to you guys to learn. And this is especially the last part where you start getting into concrete things was really fascinating, actually. So
Okay.
you guys are really living. You're really living it. I'm just kind of thinking about it and writing about it.
I'm trying to live it, but I admit freely that I'm dependent upon my husband, who has a job, although he has a job with a small manufacturing concern here in our area. He's not working for a big corporation, but he's the one who makes everything I do possible. So I have to give my credit and my honor to him for that. All right. Well, we will talk again, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And I will send you, whoever wants it, I'll send you a copy of the video for you to do with it as you wish. All right. Any closing?
Could I add one final thing on
Sure.
this? I'm really into the medium of text. We love to write. Matthew and I have written hundreds and hundreds of pages in dialogue back and forth to each other. I have a small website on the Delphi discussion forums where I have linked up some of the things I've written on distributism. The paper interview with the distributist, the one you read, was 20 pages. That's one that Matthew, in a very difficult job, had to edit down from I think it was 100 pages originally, because
It was pretty long
pages, and because I was just rambling going on. So I'd like to have those links up and invite any of your viewers that want to discuss distributism in a textual form. To me, text, I really like it because there's much more precision in it. You work hard to get the wording exactly the way you want it. And I think the distributist principles that we've been talking about that in this series you've done, Mary, really deserve a close reading. And Matthew said that this series that you've done has been one of the best he's seen, or the best overview.
It is the best.
The best overview
seen or read. Yeah, personally, I've never had a comprehensive. Yeah.
Personally, I'd like to see it in text. Text is easier, at least from the standpoint of it's searchable, that you can find the different individual components of distributism and that sort of thing. But anyways, I just wanted to invite people to a discussion forum if they wanted to see it, and a place where that you can see some more of these extensive writings that we've done, Matthew and I.
Well, I really appreciate that. So, you know, whatever, I'll put whatever links you want to any documents or websites or anything in the, we'll put that in, I'll put that in the notes under this video, and people can go there and look, and they'll know where to find you and where to find your writing and everything like that. So, yeah, I think this is great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to end the recording.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, I'm going to end
Thank
the
you.
recording now, but we'll still be connected. So I'm going to end the recording now.